Today's show is part 2 of our conversation with Mr. Perry Husband, and we're talking hitting, pitching, EV, effective velocity.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Geoff Rottmayer, and we continue our conversation with Mr. Perry Husband of hittingoftheguest.com, a pioneer in the world of baseball science. Yesterday, we ended the conversation talking about what EV, effective velocity, is and why it's important as a hitter and a pitcher to understand this. So Perry, let's continue our conversation. You had gotten into talking about tunneling. So why don't you talk a little bit about what that is and what it means?
Well, an EV tunnel, and there's a lot of people out there talking about tunnels that have kind of borrowed that, so to speak. But pitch tunnels from an EV perspective means that when the pitcher lets go of a fastball, let's say he throws his fastball, it creates a line. And it's on two planes, right? It's on a horizontal plane and it's on a vertical plane. And so one of the first things we did was test to see what hitters could see. And the first thing that hitters can see within about 5 feet out of your hand is where the ball's going, up, down, in, or out. So once the fastball's thrown, your mind sees this line. And now when a pitch is thrown that is a different type of pitch, like a slider, then the slider, if it stays in that same line, and when I say line, I mean, and that's why it was called a tunnel instead of a plane, because the tunnel means that if you were to create an actual tunnel, both of those pitches would be coming out of it. They would both be on the same vertical line, plane, and on the same horizontal plane. So they look exactly alike coming out of the hand, and they travel that way for about a third of the way to the plate. And any pitch that does that is what I would refer to as an EV tunnel. Pitch has an EV tunnel. So the typical pitcher that throws a fastball, let's just say up and in, and then if it's a right-handed pitcher with a right-handed batter, and the right-handed pitcher throws the ball up and in, and then they come back and they throw a slider down and away, when they let go of both of those pitches, they're going to look really similar to each other, if not exactly the same. The pitchers that are really good, like a Scherzer, his slider and his changeup and his fastball look absolutely identical when they come out of the hand, with only slight spin changes. Everything else looks the same to the hitter, but they go to 3 different parts of the strike zone at 3 different speeds. That's what a tunnel just is, basically the idea that pitches look alike coming out of the hand. That's the easiest way to say it. And some tunnels are really good and some tunnels are really bad. There are some tunnels that are actually killing pitchers and they don't even know it because they have them at the wrong EV speeds.
Oh, so it's measured off speed.
Yeah, because to be an EV tunnel, a good EV tunnel, you have to make sure that there's 6 miles an hour of EV speed between the two pitches. So we're getting pretty complex, but CC Sabathia is a great example. Against right-handed pitchers, back in the day, he threw 95, 96. And when he throws 90, 95 up and into a right-handed batter, the effective speed is really 100, okay? Because it's up and in, and that's the extreme. That takes the most time away from the hitter. He has to hit it the furthest out in front. And so, but he also throws a sinker that at about 92 that looks identical coming out of the hand. And then the four-seamer stays straighter and the sinker moves away from the right-handed batter. So it moves to the middle away part of the strike zone. So 92 turns to about 88. So against right-handed batters, he's got 188 that look exactly the same, and they're both fastballs. That's a huge advantage to a pitcher. So now if you flip over to the left-handed batter's box, now that same fastball that was up and in to the lefty or to the righty is now up and away to the lefty. And now when he throws that sinker, same tunnel, it looks exactly the same to this hitter, but now that 92 moves to middle in to the lefty, and now it's 95. So he's throwing the first fastball at 95 is 95, and then the sinker is now 95. So he's actually throwing two pitches that have the same reaction time and doesn't even know it to left-handed batters. So a lefty batter that sits on a fastball up and away, and then he throws the sinker middle in, will run right into that. He might not even know that it's a different pitch. He just swings the bat at the up and away fastball, and that other one runs into his bat. So that's a really bad EV tunnel. that one hurts him, and most pitchers don't even know when they're doing that.
Yeah. So as a pitcher, what does that mean in terms of how do they develop that? How do they kind of start working on the tunneling concept?
Well, there's a ton of ways to do it. There is, you can overlay pitches with video to find out where your ideal tunnels are. You can, now that some of the technology has gotten better, they actually do 3D versions of the tunnel, which is something that my patent kind of covers. So we'll be talking about that at some point. But at the end of the day, it's about learning when your pitches look alike. The easiest way for a normal person to do it that's teaching it is to videotape from that center field camera view. But you see it every night on the internet. You see guys doing overlays. They're about 10 years late to the party, but that was when I was doing it. It wasn't legal. Major League Baseball would shut you down if you showed anything like that on social media. But somehow they changed that, and guys have gotten pretty famous doing overlays. But we were doing overlays with Carlos back in 2009 in order to show him what pitches were hiding and what pitches were not. So that was how kind of I got my PhD in effective velocity at the big league level. Was working for Carlos in 2009, helping him do his game plans every night based on EV.
Right. So talk about that a little bit. You know, what is the process like to developing a game plan based on EV?
Well, if I'm facing CC Sabathia, then the first thing I got to do is figure out that 95 up and away is the same as 95 middle in. And so I get 2 for 1 if I understand that. And then you start doing some math to figure out how often he does things and what's the likelihood that he's going to throw a pitch that looks like this but ends up out of the strike zone. And so you look at data and you combine that with pitcher deception. And I'm going to look at about probably 70 plus different things before I come up with a game plan that makes sense. But when you look at those 70 plus things, it is super obvious as to exactly what your game plan should be. Every pitcher in the big leagues is making big mistakes when it comes to their game plan. There's holes in every major league pitcher's approach, with just a few exceptions that are really difficult. Scherzer, Kershaw of old. Now he's become very predictable. There's tons of pitchers in the big leagues that would have 0 holes if they knew exactly what they were doing. But when you don't know what you're doing, you're bound to have a lot of crossovers. You're bound to throw, when you move your fastball, for example, up and in, down and away, middle in, middle away. Every time you throw those pitches, you're changing the speed, right? Maybe the best way to think about it is like this. If you had a young pitcher, would you tell him to throw the slider up and in, down and away, middle in, middle away. No, the slider is designed to do one thing, right? To look like a fastball and move away from a right-handed batter if you're a righty pitcher. So the slider has a very distinct purpose. It's supposed to be a medium speed pitch, and it's supposed to look like a fastball, and it's supposed to go to a slower part of the strike zone. So you wouldn't tell that pitcher to throw the slider up, right? That's hanging, as they say. But we do tell them to take the fastball and throw it all over the strike zone, because that messes with the hitter's timing. In reality, you're actually helping the hitter dramatically by doing that, because the fastball is called a fastball for a reason. It's supposed to be fast. But when you throw it away or down, it's no longer fast. It's the slower version of the fastball. So a fastball down is hanging, just like a slider up is hanging. The fastball down, in fact, you're 4 times more likely to hit a fastball down hard than you are to hit a hanging changeup. Imagine that. You can hang a slider, and I can't remember the exact numbers. I did this study, and it was one of them was 4 times, one of them was 3 times, and one of them was 2 times with the off-speed pitches. But the worst was, and let's just call it a curveball. I think the hanging curveball, in fact, no, I think that the curveball was 4. Don't quote me on this, but it basically, if you hang a curveball, you're at least 2 times more likely to get away with it than you are if you hang a fastball at the bottom of the strike zone. Bottom of the zone's fastballs get hit with the highest exit velocity, the most homers, the most hard hit balls happen when hitters have a chance to see the fastball in an area that they expect, and it's going at the line that they expect. It's going downhill, like their swing's going uphill. So that's an accident waiting to happen. And yet every front office has 20 guys in there saying that the best place to live is at the bottom of the strike zone. I'm not sure what metric they're using to see that, but it's what led to the homer explosion.
Yeah. So let's take that to more of the college and the high school level, and they're kind of all living in that little outside corner too.
Not all of them. There's a lot of them now that are EV focused.
Really?
Yeah, I would say
nice.
Probably 3/4 of the high level college, have been introduced to effective velocity,
really?
And they
That's
understand
great.
it to some degree, but
yeah.
they're not black belts. Virtually everyone in baseball at every level understands effective velocity at the sexy level, right? The tunnels are easy for anybody to understand. But they don't understand the different nuances about it. They just know that if you hide a pitch, it's going to end up being harder for guys to react to. But unless you add in the EV speed, and like with our CC Sabathia example, you don't know whether that tunnel is good or bad. That tunnel actually hurts him against lefties, and he doesn't know it. Well, maybe he knows it now. I don't know. But at that point, he didn't know it because he continued to do it. There's actually a bunch of lefties that are in that same boat. Felix Dubrant did the same thing. There were many guys that had that same scenario. Cliff Lee did that same thing to lefties. To righties, it was devastating. To lefties, it was not advisable. So it's at the end of the day, there's a ton of high school, college coaches that understand EV. I've been doing this for a long time now, since 2005 is when I released the books. 2004, and guys are all over the place. One of the first guys the first guy that I introduced it to was Tom House, because I wanted him to punch holes in it for me. And Tom was like, "No, this is why a beer keg like me could pitch in the big leagues. Is you're right on the money." And he actually was really good friends with Bobby Valentine. They spent time together in the big leagues. I think on the Rangers staff, he was the pitching coach when Bobby was the manager at one point, when they had Nolan Ryan. And he at that time, Bobby Valentine was over in Japan, and he hadn't won a championship over there yet. But Tom went over there and introduced pitch tunnels, and Bobby won his first, whatever it's called over there, national title over there. And that was the next year after that was the first year of the World Baseball Classic. And the World Baseball Classic, if I would have told you before it started that Japan and Korea were going to be in the top 2 out of the 3 top pitching teams in the world, I would have been laughed out of baseball. But they were. They were, I think, first and third in the best pitching staff in the world baseball classic that year, because every pitcher had tunnels. Every pitcher was hiding pitches. They had Koji Uehara on that team, I think, and Matsuzaka, and every guy had pitch tunnels. They were hiding pitches. They didn't know the ins and outs of it, but that's how this works. And at the college level, high school level, EV is rampant all over the place. Everybody's using it. They're trying to anyway. They're using the version that they understand. That's the hard part, to get anybody to go deeper than that, because some of the experts in the world of internet gurus they're telling everyone that effective velocity doesn't really work because the speeds it doesn't add or subtract speed as much as the theory says. And so you can forget about the EV portion of it. It's just about tunnels. But the EV part of it is actually the most important part. It's the part that it's the landings. If you don't understand how speed works in the strike zone, you're doomed to make a bunch of crossover mistakes, like and
just for the people that are listening, can you define crossover mistake?
Well, I throw a fastball at 96, but I throw it down and away. It's really 91, and I throw my cutter at 88, but I throw it middle in, and now it's 91. So I'm throwing 2 pitches that the radar gun says are 8 miles an hour apart, but in reality, they're exactly the same. In fact, the cutter could actually be faster than that fastball if I threw it to the up and in part of the strike zone. So a crossover means when your faster pitch is getting slower and your slower pitch is getting faster. Look at it like this. This one I've had a lot of success with making people understand. Picture yourself as a defensive back, and your job is to cover 2 receivers. Okay. And I'm a quarterback, and I'm going to send my receivers out 10 yards apart right next to you. So where are you going to go to cover both of those guys? You're most likely going to go exactly in the center, right? Because by the time I take the football back and start leaning towards the guy I'm going to throw it to, you can quickly take a step or 2 and be there in plenty of time, right? So it's a no-brainer that you're exactly in the middle when I send out guys 10 yards apart. So now I send out guys 20 yards apart, right? You're still going to go in the middle, but now you can't quite get there as quick. And so now there's going to be a tendency for you to lean a little bit. So now you do some stat work, and you realize I go to the guy on the left a little more often. So you're going to kind of probably lean in that direction, right? And then do the best you can to try to cover both guys. And then now I'm going to send them out at 30 yards apart. Now there's no way that you can cover both of those guys. And so what's going to end up happening is you're going to go to a predictable place on the field based on what your assignment is. And if you're assigned to cover two guys, then it's really difficult when they start to get more than 15 yards apart. So now picture you're the same defensive back, and I send out 3 receivers, but I send them all in your general area. Like one guy's going to do a post pattern, and the other guy's going to be on the other side of the field, but he's going to come across the field heading towards you. At the big league level, that's what a crossover is the quarterback is sending all these guys right to you, right to you, and in an area where you can cover 3 guys, even though you're 30 yards downfield and you're just standing there. They're literally going to throw their 3 receivers right in your general vicinity. That's what's happening at the big league level right now is because they don't understand effective velocity speeds. They keep throwing pitches that are moving towards where the hitter is defending. That's probably the best way to describe it. I don't know
Receive a Baseball Awakening decal by subscribing on iTunes and leaving an objective review. To claim your decals, screenshot the review and email it to Geoff@baseballawakening.com. That's GEOFF@baseballawakening.com, and we'll get that your way.
Yeah, so I think that paints a good picture. So really, when we kind of sit down and kind of look at it, it's speed that we're talking about. Not so much movement, but speed.
It's speed. Yeah, the movement changes the speed, but it changes it either positively or negatively, right?
Right.
Right. Everything depends on the hitter.
Right. So if I'm a hitter and I'm looking at a certain speed and the pitch is in that speed, I'm hitting it.
Well, you're going to have the best chance. You still have the hard part of hitting is no matter what happens, you're going to fail 60% or more.
Right. So I get the question is you're sitting on a speed,
but you're right,
more than you are a pitch.
Yes, you're right on the money. Is that's what hitters are doing right now? Is they're living in a speed range. And pitchers are throwing a lot of pitches in that speed range, a lot. And pretty soon they're going to stop it. And when they stop it, that philosophy is going to not have any idea what to do, because right now they're just swinging up. And they're getting a lot of pitches that are just going down, and they're going down in that speed range that they're the most prepared to hit.
Right. So you had mentioned something earlier that – when they figured the EV concept out at the big league level, hitting's gonna get much harder than it already is. So what do we do now? What do hitters do when they figure this out?
Well, they have to train completely different. That's why when I made the discovery of EV with Tim way back, I mean, it was actually a little bit earlier than that, but once you discover EV and you understand, all of a sudden you start hearing the things like we first started talking about: get your foot down early, see the ball deep. You know that none of those things work really. They really don't work anymore unless pitchers are going to cooperate fully with you and throw pitches in your speed range, in your area. And so you have to start training different. You have to. What happened with Carlos was one of those guys. He was a see it, hit it guy. And our first conversation was pretty funny. I'm trying to explain to him what EV is. And he's like, I just could never imagine myself sitting on a pitch. And I said, he goes, I'm just a see it, hit it guy. I said, okay, so I've done a little research and in 0-2 counts, 0-2, 1-2, that's the most reactionary counts, right? Where you have to see it and hit it. You're hitting 0.85 in those counts. So, and you're leading the league in strikeouts. So really, are you good at see it and hit it? Because those are the most reactionary counts, and you're not that great in those counts, and you're swinging and missing a lot. So in reality, you're not quite as good at seeing it and hitting it. And so my question is, what do you have to lose? When you look at a guy like Roger Clemens, he had about the reverse of that. He had an 0.85 batting average in 0.212 counts. I can't remember what the study was. It was like 3 years, or it might have been more than 3 years, but I think it was 3 years. Guys hit 0.85 when he gets them to an 0.2 count. And so I asked Carlos, what do you think he's going to throw? He's going to throw a slider, a split, changeup, and a fastball. So where's he going to throw the fastball? He's going to elevate it. Okay, well, what's he going to do with the slider? It's going to be down. Is it going to be in the strike zone ever? No. He's never going to make a mistake with that, hardly ever. How about the split? No, it's going to be down. So of those three, what can you hit? And he said, well, none of them, because I don't hit the fastball up very well. I said, well, what if you hunted it? What if you sat on the fastball up? Now, what would those pitches that are at the bottom of the zone look like? And so you would start taking those pitches and you would start hitting the pitch at the top of the strike zone because you're expecting it, you're ambushing it. So immediately, I'd rather have an 0-2 count with Roger Clemens than have an 0-0 count, because I got no idea what he's going to do 0-0, but I do know that when he gets to 0-2, what's going to happen. And so I have a big advantage if I understand that. And I'm going to strike out anyway. So what it doesn't hurt me in any way to think about that completely differently. And so that made a lot of sense to him. And he actually got better during 2009. His strikeouts went down 25%. His batting average went up 25%. And his chase rate outside the strike zone went down 2%, meaning he was already great. He didn't chase very often. He was like in the Joey Votto 20% chase rate. And he went down to 18 during that period and hit a homer every 8.5 at bats. So his ability to be 100 100% on time with 100% of his mechanical efficiency, that happened way more often, and yet he chased less and he struck out less. So that's what a hitter has to do, is they have to understand what they're up against, because you cannot cover everything. You can't cover the whole zone at all those speeds. It's like trying to cover 4 receivers all over the field. You can't. It's physically impossible.
Right, and this is where, guys need to start paying attention to how pitchers are throwing to them. At the professional level, in the college level, they get access to data to help them. But these younger guys got to start paying attention and learning. Until they get to the level, they've got to learn to kind of pay attention.
Yeah, and it's more than that, actually. You have to not only pay attention, because you could watch Roger Clemens go about his business and still have no idea what he's doing, and still have no idea how to combat that. You have to think about it from a completely different perspective in order to really understand how to use speed in a way that's going to help you the most.
Right. And you said something earlier yesterday that a guy could possibly hit 100 home runs if they wanted to, and if they would develop a better plan. So can you talk a little bit about what you mean by how can a guy hit 100 home runs?
Well, a guy like Aaron Judge, who, in my opinion, has some swing things that aren't ideal, and primarily that just means his swing plane is way too upward. So he's going to crush fastballs down, sliders that are heading down, curveballs that are heading down, but fastballs that are flat, he's going to struggle with that. Same with a bunch of other guys. But he has the ability to hit a ball at 75% of his max and hit a homer. So if he were to max out his everything, and I'm not saying that he's that far away, but I do think there are players Avisail Garcia hit a ball at 125, and Judge's max is 122. Kevin Kiermaier, I think, hit one at 126.
Yeah.
And so when you tell me that less strong hitters have higher exit velocity than him, my only answer to that is, I just don't think so. I think his approach is making him not square up the fastest pitches. In other words, this is one of those things that makes me crazy. There was a study done. There was somebody noticed that Giancarlo Stanton kept hitting all these off-speed pitches at max speed, right? His maximum exit velocity was almost always on an 80 or 79 or 83 mile an hour pitch. And so they concluded that, well, if all these pitches are being hit, the highest exit velocity is happening at low velocity pitches, then the speed of the pitch doesn't really matter. In other words, the old adage that the harder it comes in, the harder it goes out is false, which is ludicrous to say, because what's happening with Giancarlo Stanton, if you look at his data, he never hits a ball at 95 miles an hour up and in anywhere near his maximum swing efficiency. So if you look at that number 100% on time with 100% of his swing efficiency, when he gets a fastball in, he's about 70% on time with about 70% of his maximum. And so he's hitting that fastball in at 70-70. And yet Major League Baseball is looking at that because he does that and he's at the elite level. That's the best way to do it. And the answer to that is not no, but hell no, that's ridiculous. So if he were to change his philosophy and understand who it was that was going to pound him inside, and he sat on that pitch when it made the most sense, and he actually squared that pitch up at 100 miles an hour, you would see Giancarlo and Aaron Judge lift the bar again. In other words, because the speed is greater, they're going to have greater exit velocities when they square up faster pitches. They just don't. They don't square up faster pitches because it's not their game plan. That's how data can lead you down a rabbit hole. If you just look at the data and you draw a conclusion based on that without testing it. Nobody tested Giancarlo Stanton at 70, 80, 90, and 100 miles an hour pitches and said he actually does hit the 80 mile an hour pitches harder. Nobody did that because it wouldn't happen like that. If they tested all those things, they would find that the 100 mile an hour balls that he hit were in the 128 exit velocity range. And that's one of the things that makes me crazy about the game is data is it's only as good as the interpretation. Data is not science. By itself, data is not science. It's just all it is it allows you and I to create theories about stuff. But until you test it, it's just a theory. And that's why EV is really the only science when it comes to pitch sequencing that there is, because I tested every aspect of it way before I went to the major league databases to see that it was right. I tested every part of it. That's why I know it's going to change. I know that it's only a matter of time before major league players start to really realize what they're leaving on the table by not understanding EV.
Right. That both hitters and pitchers.
Yeah. Well, hitters will find out really quickly because when what they've been doing stops working, like it did in the World Series and in the playoffs, you saw a lot of it.
Yeah.
All those really great bats went away, except the few that were the one thing you saw in the playoffs also was that the Boston Red Sox has the best offense because one of their guys, Tim Hires, understands EV. He's training in a different way. They're looking at things in a different way. And that's the one offense you saw that didn't really go that far away from their norm. Everybody else fell off the planet.
So if I'm a guy listening and I want to know, obviously you have your books and your program, which we can find on hittingittheguest.com, and I highly recommend it. If I were to take something away from this conversation, what's my action item to start implementing EV into my thought process and my training? So, as a pitcher, I need to learn about EV speed tunneling. And then as a hitter, I need to understand kind of EV speed.
That's a loaded question, man. Because you we spent more than an hour talking about what it means, right? So there's a learning curve just to understand what is happening. And then to actually start putting into play is another conversation again. But at the end of the day, the first thing is to educate yourself so that you get it, you understand it. And once you understand it, it's almost like, well, I'm kind of going to know what to do because if the pitcher's going to fool me with tunnels, then I have to get better at seeing. I have to get better at my homework, and I also have to get better at seeing little details. And so the future of hitting training is going to be actually a lot of fun. One of the things that we started doing right away is we got these small little foam training balls that are about the size of a golf ball.
Yeah.
And from 18 feet, you can actually create kind of like a big league slider movement. Whereas with a baseball throwing BP, you can never get that kind of movement. But with these small balls, you can get, sinker movement and cutter movement and slider movement, and you recreate the same time. And so you can actually have at bats that are closer to real life in some respects. I mean, it's never going to be the same, obviously,
sure.
But in a practice setting, if I can create the same angle, the same timing, the same look, basically, of the pitch. One of the terms that EV came out with was the term shape, which was the idea of when a pitch it starts off, it looks kind of straight. It goes straight in the beginning, but then when the movement kicks in, it develops into a shape, like a cutter and a slider and a sinker and a four-seam fastball. They all have different shapes. And with hitters recognizing pitches, you have to recognize the shape, because the shape tells you what the speed is going to be. And that's difficult. It's at that speed, it's very difficult, but it gets easier when you have everything going at that speed, all your training.
Yeah.
Pardon me. But that's the future of training. That's where it'll be a lot more fun when you really understand what's going on. See, this is just a big chess match. And the hitters made a move. They made a move they started swinging up, and they started swinging in a speed range. That was their move. And the pitchers haven't countered yet. But when they counter, it's going to be ugly.
Yeah.
And the counter is effective velocity. That's the answer. And when they do, you're going to see some crazy things happening with that. But the big takeaway for me is just educate. You have to educate. You have to understand that there is a lot to the game. When it comes to pitchers and hitters, there's a ton of it. And so EV is the explanation. It's the thing that tells you what's really going on. It's like the gravity of hard hit balls.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to understand anything about gravity to trip. And EV is determining success with the pitcher and the hitter every night, whether they know it or not. In most cases, they don't. But the people that know precisely are the ones that are going to dominate coming up.
Yeah.
So educate, get the books, understand that the video program is really cool. It's a lot easier when you describe it rather than read it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit difficult to read something three-dimensional like effective velocity and really understand it. I had a lot of people say to me they've read it 3 or 4 times and they still have questions because it's hard. It's hard to without like the idea of the T and the idea of the quarterback and the defensive back. That helps, I hope, because
that does help. Yeah, absolutely.
It puts it more of in a 3D atmosphere, which is what's really happening.
Great. Well, sir, Mr. Perry Husband, I appreciate your time. I learned a lot. I'm pretty sure my listeners will as well. So I could do another whole podcast with you, but I'm gonna let you go, and I appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. It was fun. We'll catch up sometime down the road.
I'm Geoff Rottmayer, and thank you for listening to our conversation on the Baseball Awakening podcast. Stay tuned for our recap show tomorrow.